Thank you for coming to my channel. Thank you for coming back to my channel. I appreciate you all, and if you want to hit that subscribe button to get all of the newest whispered creepypastas and other things, you know I do a ton of other stuff, then you hit that thumbs up and that bell button. So before we get started on a really creepy pasta Halloween edition, because it is spooky season, I want you to relax. Close your eyes if you have already gotten ready for bed, brushed your teeth, taken your medication that you may need to set your alarm, plugged in those electronics, and gotten your glass of water, and relax, sit back, and enjoy my voice. It should lull you to sleep and terrify you at the same time. This is by you clever name 21, October 30th. It's a nice morning. I sit on the porch, immersed in the paper. I like to read on the porch before the day begins. It wakes me up more than coffee ever could. I'm scanning over the local sections at the time, so is going to be inaugurated as mayor soon. The park needs to be safer, says citizens. I'm reaching the end of the page when a noise alerts me and I glance up. A small girl is standing at the end of the stepping stone walkway that leads up to my porch. She has a white dress on and a white veil falls down over her face, hiding any features. Strange, I thought. It made me feel uneasy. Well, it could be the fact that the sun isn't completely done rising behind her, or perhaps that my vision isn't quite up for it so early in the morning, but she appears grainy and washed out. Like an old photograph. The effect is unsettling. She stands and doesn't move. I call out, "Hello? Are you lost? Do you know where your parents are?" No response. For a second or two, then she cocks her head. It's not Halloween yet. I'm not sure what that has to do with her parents, but Halloween is tomorrow, she says in a quiet voice. It's the middle of July. I'm on the porch in shorts and a t-shirt. October is months away. I'm sorry, I said loud. Are you sure you aren't lost? Let's find your parents. She goes, "Step. No, don't you touch me. I'm gonna tell my daddy. He'll hit you really hard. Stop it, stop." I had previously been beckoning to her, but I stopped immediately. I drew back, uncertain of how to deal with this situation. The child turns and runs from me. What in the hell just happened? What? I tell myself I should chase after her, but I don't want to. It's so unsettling. I felt like a creep, but she was on my porch. So about a month later, in the evening, and I'm sorting through my attic, I sift through a pile of old bedspreads and uncover a small box. I've never seen this box before. It's completely unfamiliar to me, but that's not unusual. Because see, the first year I moved in, I found loads of things belonging to the previous owners. I opened the box up and I see that it contains old photographs. I reached my hand and pulled out one that caught my eye. It must have been from someone who lived there a number of years ago because it's an old Polaroid picture that's taken on a worn-out sepia tone, and the picture itself is slightly blurred. But when I focus on the picture, I smile. It's a picture of the little girl sitting in a yard surrounded by piles of leaves. She has a huge smile on her face and appears to be enjoying herself. But something else catches my eye. There's a light blue sedan parked almost out of sight in the corner of the picture. A shadowy figure is just noticeable behind the wheel. The car is familiar, but I don't know from where. I place the picture in the box and pick it up another. The girl again. Now she's on a swing. A set in a nearby park that I sometimes take my niece to. It looks like her mother is pushing her. In the park, I can see the sedan again. The shadowy figure seems to be looking in the direction of the little girl. I'm a little unnerved by it, but I don't know, perhaps it's just a relative. I pick up another picture. My heart skips a beat, knocking the smile from my face. It looks to be early fall, and the girl is standing on the sidewalk at the end of the walkway leading up to my front porch. She's wearing a white dress with a thin veil hanging over her face. It looks way too early to be fall. The picture is washed out and grainy. I swallow hard and feel a chill run down my back. The sedan is in the picture again. It appears to be idling almost out of sight of the photo at the edge of the curb on the other side of the street. The shadowy figure is staring at the child again. I can make out a slight upturn at the corner of his lips. I shudder involuntarily. I know why the sedan is familiar. I've seen it idling in that same spot before. There's a rap on my front door. The sudden noise nearly gives me a heart attack. I take one last look at the box of pictures, then bury it beneath all of the sheets I found it under. I have no intention of ever looking at it again. I rush out of the attic and down the stairs to my first floor. I'm spooked and leave on all the lights behind me. My mind doesn't process that it is strange to have someone knocking this late at night. I just hope that it's someone who I can sit down with, a rational human being who can allay my fears. But no luck, of course. When I open the door, there's nobody there. A cold breeze pushes through my clothing and up my spine. I shout at the night. It was just teenagers, ding-dong ditching. At least that's what I whisper to myself silently. That's enough, I begin to shut the door. As I'm closing it, my eyes are drawn to a blue sedan idling at the end of the road. I open the door to get a closer look, but it pulls back and drives away. I slam the door shut and I run to my couch. I turn on the television and get a fitful night's sleep. October 30th. I'm lying in my bedroom trying to fall asleep. I had spoken to a friend since the events of 2 months ago and decided that I was absolutely overreacting to a series of unusually weird coincidences. However, tonight I feel super uneasy. I stare up the ceiling and try to imagine it is an impenetrable barrier keeping anything out of my room that I don't want to come inside. But is that even possible? I haven't returned to the attic. Not since that evening. I'm worried the picture won't be there anymore. Or maybe I'm worried about something worse. My phone rings. I give out a gasp of surprise, then feel really silly and embarrassed. I lean over and pick it up off my nightstand. Hello, I inquire in a calm voice. As possible. Trick or treat, comes a hollow voice on the other end of the line. I freeze. It feels like the cold sweat that's been beating on my forehead all night has frozen as well. I'm about to choke out a response, but someone else does before I can. It's not Halloween yet. Halloween is tomorrow. I'm just trying on my outfit. I'm breaking down in my bed. I feel like I'm going insane. Really? Is that so? I'll just have to come back later. Returns the empty voice. I've had enough. I slam the phone back down on the receiver and jump out of my bed. Run down the hall, put the shoes on. I'm going to the police to report this. As I slide into my sneakers, I hear a knock. It's not coming from downstairs. It's coming from the door of the bathroom adjoining my room. I begin to whimper and squeeze out tears from the corners of my eyes. Trick or treat. It was the hollow voice from the phone. Empty, cold. I can feel it crawling into my head, curling around my consciousness and constricting it. The sound of it was driving me insane. I sprint out of my room and nearly break my neck, grabbing onto the banister at the top of the stairs and spinning around to go crashing down the steps. I dash through my kitchen and up my front door. I fumble with it, trying to get it open. I hear sounds coming from upstairs. Slow, dragging footsteps. I moan and try to shut out the soft, focusing on the door. Finally, I regain my motor skills enough to turn the knob properly. And I set out into the night, slam the door as I leave. I nearly trip over a little girl standing on my porch. She is dressed in all white. She's frozen in place and stops me in my tracks. I'm immobilized by fear. My mind feels frayed and tired at the edges. I can't. No, I don't want to comprehend what's happening. A hand reaches out from one of the little girl's sleeves and grabs a hold of my wrist. What little blood that was left in my face now completely drains out. I look down at the hand grasping my arm with a morbid understanding. It's not the hand of a child. was amazing. That was a really good ending. I give it a 8 out of 10. On to the next. Pretty on Arno's sleep. Arno's sleep. By Grave Night. So this is my wife's story. I keep telling her she needs to make a Reddit account and post it here, but she refuses and insists that I would be able to tell it better anyway. That's my thing. She tells me, so fine, I'll do it. It's probably more no sleep style than the last story I posted anyway. You see, I had to work Halloween night, but my wife and some of her coworkers got dressed up and went out to the club. My wife loves Halloween. She loves wearing costumes and seeing other people wearing costumes, and she just loves the whole scene. She loves sick and twisted horror movies like Saw and the Human Centipede. She went out that night as zombie Amy Winehouse. I love her. At the clubs, there was the usual sea of people, those wearing costumes. Most of the girls were sexy, skimpy, and wearing revealing costumes, while guys' costumes range from superheroes, video game characters, to zombies, evil clowns, and, well, big penises with balls trying to annoy everybody on the dance floor. According to my wife, there were very few scary costumes, if you know what I mean. But one guy did stick out. One guy in particular. As my wife put it, he managed to be super fucking creepy without really trying at all. He stood off by himself in the club, a total wallflower, which made the whole effect he was going for that much creepier, I suppose. He really wasn't wearing a costume. He was in jeans and a pea coat. Basically the sort of clothes you would expect someone to wear on a typical autumn day here in our city. He was just wearing a mask. The mask was that of a woman's face. It literally looked like a face that had been freshly skinned or ripped off some young woman. It was bloody and even a little moist. My wife said it was obviously meant to look fresh, quote unquote. The mask was held to the man's face with a piece of twine that had been sewn or stapled to the temples of the woman's face. My wife never actually saw the man's face as he never took the mask off. He was able to drink using a straw through the mouth hole. The area around the mask, including a thick black beard he had under the mask, was glistening with fake blood. The entire effect was so weird and creepy and bizarre, my wife couldn't help but go up and compliment him on his awesome Halloween mask. When she approached him and complimented him, he responded by shouting, "I'm pretty." Okay, my wife just laughed and went back to her friends. They finished the night off at a different club and eventually came home for the night after the clubs had closed. The next day, my wife and I were sitting on the couch together. She was watching the local news, and since I get all the news from Reddit, I was sitting there with my laptop Redditing away. wife almost chokes on the glass of water she happened to be drinking and gasps. "No fucking way," she exclaimed. I immediately glance up from my screen at her. "What?" Shh, what? Listen. She grabbed for the remote and turned the volume up. On the TV, our local news anchor was reporting. There was a picture of a young woman on the screen. Police say the woman was last seen leaving work Tuesday, October 30th at 5:30 p.m. Friends and co-workers reported her missing after she failed to show up to work on Wednesday morning, and all attempts to locate her were unsuccessful. She is described as a 5'4" woman weighing 120 pounds. She has dark hair and blue eyes. She was last seen wearing a black dress, pants, and "That's fucking her," my wife cried to me. I had no idea what she was talking about. "That sick fuck wearing her face." "Oh my god, I need to make a phone call," she said, grabbing her phone, frantically dialing. "Are you phoning the police?" I asked, starting to get the idea. I'm gonna call Megan first. She saw the guy too," she replied, and then waved me off as she pulled the phone to her ear. "Hey Megs, are you home?" "Yeah, are you watching the news by any chance?" "Oh shit, hang on." My wife holds the phone away and turns to me. "Can you bring up the local news website and see if they had the story on there?" I did as she asked, and sure enough, I found the website along with the story of the missing woman. My wife looked at the screen and saw the woman's face again. She then gave me a very grave, serious stare that I'd never seen before. She was more than sure. She knew for a fact. My wife relayed the information to Megan and had her look at the website too. Immediately, I could hear Megan freaking out on the other end of the phone. "Okay, I'm gonna hang up and call the police." "You should do the same." My wife then hung up the phone and just nodded to me. "Yep, this is really happening." She called the police and was put through a tip line that had been set up for tips about this woman. She told the person on the tip line about the guy at the club, where and what time she saw him in the best description she could give of him, which, really wasn't much. To her relief, the person on the tip line informed her that they were getting lots of calls, all stating the same thing. So many calls from people who had seen this guy with the mask that the police were acting on it. All the nightclubs in our town are connected to a central security database. When you enter one club here, the first thing that happens is you go through a metal detector. Then you get a quick pat down. Then they take your ID and scan it and ask you to look straight at the security camera that takes your picture. I guess the idea is that they can ban someone from all the clubs in our town if they start shit in just one of them. Makes sense, right? The police went to the club this guy was reported at, and using the database and security footage, they were able to ID him and track him down. They went to his apartment with the search warrant, and when no one answered the door, they let themselves in. They found the guy hanging in his front hall closet. He was naked, wearing nothing but the mask. In his bathroom, in a bloody bathtub, they found the missing woman's son's face. She had been apparently dead since Halloween morning, and he had hung himself sometime early November 1st, probably around the time that the young woman's disappearance hit the news. This incident would have been enough on its own to scare my wife silly, but the fact that she had conversed with this psychotic killer, albeit briefly, as he had only said 2 words to her, was enough to cause some severe anxiety. The next morning, my wife, who hadn't worked since the day of Halloween, went to her car to drive to work. On her windshield, under one of the wipers, she saw a note. It was a little soggy as it had been raining the last couple days. She picked it up thinking it was from one of the neighbors. She picked it up, read it, opened it, read it, and it was a note that would have made most women's hearts stop. It made my wife go weak in the knees. The note simply read, "You're pretty." Wow, I love that one. That's really good. These are good. These are like the best of Halloween. Of them all, like the best. Well, according to this person. Of course. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of creepypastas. Halloween. Let's see. How about are no sleep Halloween warning. Warning to the people in Oregon, Portland that is, metro area this Halloween. You see, this really freaked me out. Yesterday I noticed my neighbor hadn't put out his Halloween decorations, lights, etc. The past 2 years I've lived next to him, he's gone all out for Halloween. You know, he's one of those people with purple and orange and pumpkins and like the whole 9 yards. The graveyard in the front, the dead zombies, everything. But nothing this year. I don't know him well. He's younger, single, but I know he likes kids. And not in a creepy way either. His brother and sister-in-law and their kids always visit him, and he plays with his 3 young nieces and nephews out in the yard. So anyway, I got home from work and was walking up my driveway and I saw him outside and said something like, "Hey man, you better get your Halloween stuff up or that house up the street is gonna beat you for best decorations." He kind of smiles sheepishly and says that he's actually going to keep his house dark this year and just put out candy only. I asked if he was going out of town, but he said no. Something happened last year that really freaked him out. Scared him, actually. Well, now I was concerned for my own safety. Yeah, if some weirdos were coming around our neighborhood, which is a pretty safe one, tons of young families live here. So I decided to ask him what happened. He said last year he had his brother's family over so they could trick or treat in the neighborhood since they live in an apartment complex that doesn't do much Halloween. He had a bunch of kids come to the door like always. His family took off around 10:30 and there were only a few older trick-or-treaters, but by 11:30 they were pretty much done. So he was out inside watching TV, and the doorbell rings. He grabs the candy bowl and heads over, noticing that it's a little past midnight and that's, well, pretty rude and late for a trick-or-treater to still be out. But then he notices he hasn't turned off all his decoration lights yet. So his house is still a beacon for trick-or-treaters. He swings the front door open and is about to yell boo or something to freak them out, but stops dead when he sees the kids at the door. He literally says, "I don't know, man, they were probably around 13 or 14 and another 16, 17, both boys. But they weren't dressed up." He remembers the older one wearing a flannel checkered shirt. He was immediately overcome with uneasiness, like opening the door was a huge mistake. They stared at him, and he noticed that they had really big irises, dilated pupils. He couldn't even see the whites of their eyes, so he figured that they were contact lenses. He froze there holding the candy bowl. Like he couldn't slam the door in their face as much as he wanted to. He nervously tried to smile at them, hoping they would break character and ask for candy or something. The younger one said they had gotten lost and needed to come in and use his phone. That's a tough one. Yeah, well, look, I closed the door more than halfway on them and said, "No, sorry." And the older one said something like, "Can we just wait in your house until our parents come get us?" But by then he was convinced that his life was in danger and these kids must be high on something or intending to rob him. And he just kept mumbling, "No, sorry, good night, good night," as he inched the door, closed and locked it. He told me he was so fucking scared at the point that they were going to try to break in through one of his windows or something. But he looked at the people and they had turned to leave. So he started watching TV with the volume really low so he could hear any outside sounds. He said he stayed up till 6 a.m. because he was too scared to go to bed and drop his guard. The whole time he's telling me this, I'm thinking, oh my god, this sounds really familiar. Just like the Black-Eyed Kids urban legend. Then I thought, hey, maybe this dude is trying to scare me because after all, he does have the Halloween spirit. I'm looking at him incredulously, but trying not to seem too gullible. So I'm like, man, that's really crazy. Sounds like the Black-Eyed Kids. He looks at me blankly. The what? Is that a movie or something? I said no, but told him to go look it up online. An hour later, I get a knock on my door and admittedly almost jump out of my skin thinking it's a demon child. My neighbor, his eyes freaking huge. He swears to me up and down that he had never heard of the BEKs before. And it is so familiar to what happened to him. We talked a while longer and I told him that quite a few people probably know about that urban legend and it's possible it was just teenagers with the black serial contacts trying to freak people out on Halloween. Which would have been genius, by the way. But he said the fear he felt was so primal and came over him the second he opened the door for them. Anyway, beware, I guess. Halloween could definitely be the perfect cover for them. Heck yeah, oh my gosh. Trust your instincts. Trust your instincts. Clockwork 27. Or no sleep. A walk home on Halloween. So I just found this subreddit and I thought it would be kind of fun to share a kind of spooky event that happened to me a few years ago around Halloween. I had just moved to my current flat in Rains Park, southwest London, and was still fairly unfamiliar with the area. Now my current bosses and supervisors know that I'm still fighting a losing battle with the underwhelming reliability of southwest drains, and as a result have less than reliable timekeeping when it comes to arriving to work on time. A battle I had hoped to circumvent with the purchase of a bicycle. Sadly, though, all too often, the London weather and my inherent idleness jointly conspire to train to take me back to Rains Park. In these circumstances, I have to take a bus to Wimbledon Common and walk the remaining 3 miles on foot. It isn't exactly what I want to do after a long day of work. Even though it's quite a pleasant walk, London doesn't have many hills. But if I walk along the Ridgeway, you can actually occasionally catch a nice view, but still. True, it is of Croydon, but a nice view nonetheless. Now, to call Wimbledon Village a privileged area would be an understatement. The driveways are home to sports cars and luxury utility vehicles. You can imagine I have a very uneventful walk home. I rarely see anyone on the trip about from the odd older couple, perhaps walking home after a late dinner party, or even a person walking their dog. The neighborhood is quiet, and it gets to bed early. It's like the rich sleep early. And that night was just like the others. Initially, I had gotten off the bus at the War Memorial, walked through the village center, and turned onto the Ridgeway. My phone's batteries had died somewhere between Wandsworth and Southfield, so I had to do the walk without music, and this always made the walk seem longer. My usual practice was to walk along and look at the houses, try and guess what the people that lived in the houses would be like. Fast cars, business types, SUV, toys still in the front yard, larger family, that kind of thing. I was playing my game and decided to have a cigarette, so I stopped. I was searching for my lighter and looking around, and I noticed that I was not the only one on the street. Now, this was unusual, but hardly alarming. I wasn't scared. What was strange, however, was that person wasn't the sort I had grown used to seeing. This person was a young lady. She appeared to be drunk and tired, perhaps. I light my cigarette and pause for a second, just a quick second, to judge if she would be capable of making it home by herself. Or perhaps maybe she would need me to see if she could call somebody for her. It was at this point I realized that she was crying. I started to walk over to make sure she was alright. She stopped walking, immediately frozen. I noticed she was in some sort of Halloween costume, a schoolgirl in fact, and as I got closer I began to realize that she was in fact around the age of 15 or 16. Her skin was deathly white. Her makeup must have been professionally done, or she had spent an incredibly long time preparing it. I began to decide that perhaps her friends had made fun of her costume and she had run off from whatever party she had been at, drunk and upset. I began to start feeling a little bit unnerved when I noticed that she was staring directly at me as I approached. I can assure you that in a city the size of London, we have an unspoken rule of avoiding eye contact with strangers at all costs. It was at this point I assumed she was under the influence of something other than alcohol, and I decided to be a bit more cautious. I stopped about 4 or 5 feet away and spoke to her. "Hey, are you okay? You seem a little upset. Are you in any sort of trouble?" "Nothing apart from that stare. Have you had a little too much to drink? Maybe some smoke?" "You're right, I know hallucinogens when I see them, but still nothing." "Do you need a taxi home? Do you remember where you live? Do you know your name?" At this point, the girl began to cry again, but this time she was absolutely wailing. Wailing. I could feel her raw sense of despair. I actually flinched at the sound. It was positively unbearable. She was dancing on the border of hysterics before even putting one foot along the line to see what would happen. I was stunned. I wanted to console her and run in equal measures. I wanted to comfort her and chastise at the All I managed was a weak, "Why are you crying?" She must have heard me somehow, because she began to draw herself back from the edge of what can only be described as a complete breakdown. She's still heaving and sobbing, but once again she brought her eyes up to mine and said very softly, "Because you're going to die." Now, I've been unfortunate enough to witness death firsthand on more than one occasion. Suffice it to say, these events have always left me with a lot to think about. And in fact, I had come to terms with my own mortality quite early in life. It struck me that perhaps, like too many of us had, this young lady had someone quite close to her die recently. Perhaps she was going through the same dark realization that follow being in the company of death. The same thoughts that keep children up at night in the pews full of at churches. I wanted to let her know that everything would be fine and that death was simply part of life. All I managed, however, was slightly incredulous. I know. At this point, she seemingly slightly taken back, almost angry. She responded, "You're going to die, and he is going to kill you." What? Alarms went off in my head. I began to feel more than a little threatened. I decided right there that talking to this girl, or talking her down from whatever bad high she was on, was no longer my responsibility. Had not the venerable Hunter S. Thompson himself warned us of the dangers of underestimating the ability of a drug to take control of a person. "Good luck," I said with that, turned and began to walk away. About 5 steps, I quickly looked back to see her still standing there. She put her head down and began to audibly sob again. I quickened my pace and shortly had walked along a natural bend in the road, leaving her out of sight. I left feeling agitated. I remember putting my headphones back in my ears and trying to listen to the music from my phone, only to remember it was out of power. I was still 2 miles away from home, but at that pace I was making, I was confident I would cover the ground in less than 20 minutes. No less than 20 minutes later, when I first heard the shouting, it was a man's voice, and layered within it was an excruciating sense of malice and rage. "I'm coming for you." I couldn't quite place the voice he had projected from, but it seemed as though he was at some distance by me. On the same road, possibly where the girl had been, I immediately realized that I was to be the victim of some sort of Halloween prank. I didn't, however, slow down. I imagined that this was the point when I was supposed to get scared. I began to run, and I was determined not to play along. Again, the man yelled, and yet it seemed to come from slightly closer. "I hate you." Now the voice had seemed to have come from somewhere quite close by me, that is to say, at the volume I had expected to have seen the man addressing me, but I was still very much alone, all alone on the street. I was also walking quite fast. The person yelling at me must have run quite fast, yet I had not heard any other footsteps. There was obviously more than one prankster, and they had hidden along points on the street. I quickly decided to be rather a poor sport and cut off the main road down Thornton Road at the Swan Pub. I hate to admit that their practical joke had gotten the better of me, and I didn't want to see what they had in store for me next, to be quite honest. I had made it to the front door of the second house on the street when the terrible voice shouted at me again, "You're gonna die!" This time the voice seemed to have come from the entrance of the street less than 80 feet away. Perhaps perhaps a last chance at scaring me before I disappeared into the darker side streets. Since these streets were darker, I decided that I would lose the pride in starting to jog down the hill. I knew it was all probably fun and games, but the ferocity of the shouting left me worried that I could in fact be dealing with a real maniac. True, it would have been interesting to be part of the most elaborated mugging I'd ever heard of, but that voice just left me with the impression of true hatred. I didn't want to meet the person or people that could mimic and channel such malignant feelings at will. I had made it to the curve where Thornton Road becomes Thornton Road when all of a sudden, "I will kill you." This time the same voice that yelled, seemed to be directly to my right. He must have been hiding behind the fence of some house, or perhaps even hidden within the house. I had obviously walked right into the trap. I broke into a sprint at this point. Pride be damned. I began to run quite fast and then faster straight downhill. At this point, I was actually beginning to panic. My mind was playing terrible tricks on me. It seemed as though the voice was all around me, constantly yelling, constantly screaming. Up ahead was the main road, or B Road to be precise. Well, light, busy, I could hail a cab and be home in minutes, but the voices, the immensity. "I hate you, you coward, die, die, die." Every second all around me, the adrenaline must have been heightening my every sense. I admit I was scared, and it seemed as though for some reason that terrible voice was booming off of every surface of the street. It felt as though I was simultaneously running away and into that mad rage. The words felt like gusts of a terrible hot wind pushing its venomous anger at me. I couldn't take it anymore. I just couldn't. The voice seemed to make me share that same intense anger. I thought to myself, am I the one shouting? I felt like a victim, and I wanted to kill the people that were playing this mad trick on me. I felt the hatred. "Time to die, coward. I hate you." I decided to give up. In one quick moment, I decided I would stop running as fast as I could and have a cigarette. Wait for these people to show themselves. Come what may, I need answers and a smoke. I quickly stopped my run and spun around. The car beeped as it raced past exactly where I would have run to had I not stopped that exact moment. I felt the air pocket ruffle the back of my hair as it sped fast. In my blind panic, I'd run past the sidewalk of the main road and onto the actual road. I had avoided running blindly into the road and being run down by inches. I looked up the road. I had come from darkness, silence. Whoever had been up there was now gone. I light my cigarette and took a few moments to calm down. Smoke had saved my life that day, friends. I went home after that. Nothing more happened to me. But as I was standing there trying to calm down, working through the panic and adrenaline, I seemed to remember I felt like I heard a soft whisper. Probably my imagination. I thought I heard a girl's voice softly saying, "Not such a coward after all, are you?" Wow, that was good. These are very good, very, very good Halloween. I don't think I've ever read any of these before. I don't want to read too long of one. Oh, It has my name in it. Fantastic. Yay. When I read scary stories with my name in it, it kind of freaks me out. I don't know why. Even if it's not spelled the same, but it's a woman. This is Our No Sleep by W. Dolphin. 2 stories of the haunted cave. Not safe for work, people. I'm not sure what that means. Because it seems kind of all the same. I don't know. I was seated between my brother Roger and Greg in the back of my brother-in-law's black Sirocco. I think so you say it. It was 3 days until Halloween, and our parents had left my sister and her husband in charge as they went to attend a school function. After dinner, Jodi and Carl, there it is, piled us into the car without a hint of our destination. The sun was setting behind us, and the sky was fading from a deep brick to a morose purple. Oh, we're going to a haunted cave in Dayton, of course, Ohio. Well, why don't we just call this me and call it a day? Carl said, turning down the radio. Haunted cave, Greg said. What? Hold on. My buttocks is falling asleep. Alright. Haunted cave, Greg asked. There was a hint of anxiety in his voice. Greg was the youngest and the most timid. We got him to watch the episode of The Twilight Zone once, and he had nightmares for weeks. Carl pulled off the highway and onto a 1-lane road. Open fields blurred past as he floored the car. Roger and Greg grabbed the car's shed handles instinctively, and I, with no other recourse, covered my eyes. The acceleration pushed me back into the cold leather of the seat. My stomach lurched as we went over a slight hill. Carl loved to go fast. It's located on a farm. He glanced at us in the rearview mirror. There are people who set it up every year, some wandering theater tour. They build a path through the tunnels, and well, you'll see, it's pretty cool. Have you been there before? I asked. Carl didn't answer. We all sat waiting for him to respond. The moment of silence lingered uncomfortably long. Finally, Jodi looked at him and whispered, "Was that the year what's-his-face disappeared?" "Turkish," Carl replied, his voice crackling slightly. "Who's Turkish?" Greg asked. Carl looked in the rear-view mirror again. This time, his expression seemed very dark, very somber. Nobody really, just somebody I knew 10 years ago. I used to be best friends with this kid named Jasper. Jasper is friends with Turkish, so all 3 of us just hung out. Turkish was a prick. He picked fights all the time, got kicked out of class, and was always on the verge of expulsion. One time he told me that he burned a neighbor's cat up to its head and then ran a lawnmower over it. Oh, what a dick. "Oh my God, poor kitty," Greg lamented, staring wistfully out the window. One October, Turkish found out about this haunted cave in Dayton and talked Jasper and me into going into it. Turkish is a horror fanatic. He used to ramble off information about obscure serial killers he'd read about. Jasper agreed to go because Jasper didn't care what he did as long as it got him out of the house on a weekend. His father was an alcoholic. I went because I wanted to keep Jasper out of trouble. You see, things had a way of going south whenever Turkish was around. We agreed to meet up at the cave, which you'll see in a couple miles. Turkish showed up late as usual. He'd stopped to get his most recent girlfriend's name tattooed on his chest. It was his idea and he made us wait for him. That was the kind of guy Turkish was. Greg paused his story, and we could see tail lights illuminating what looked like a fairground. There were hundreds of cars parked alongside of the road and in a makeshift parking lot across from the main thoroughfare. People were everywhere, most dressed in heavy jackets for the weather, but some were decked out in costumes. I counted half a dozen witches, 2 werewolves, and 1 ghost in a bedsheet who looked kind of lost. There were more zombies than I could keep track of. We pulled into the parking lot and climbed out of his car. Greg squeezed Jodi's hand tightly as we crossed the road. People milled past us, some laughing, a few crying and climbing out or into their cars, clinging to their friends. We followed Carl over a slight rise where most people seemed to be congregating, and there was the cave. It was as if the earth had been punched from below by a fist the size of a house. A gigantic hill of jagged rock and a black gaping maw in the center of the bus. In the center, the size of a bus, dripping torches lined the sides of a blank hallway. Descending into the mouth of the cave. In acknowledgement of the cave's monstrous form, 2 equally enormous papier-mâché skeleton hands had been erected on either side, ushering victims into the cavern to be consumed. Screams and the sound of roaring and chainsaws emanated from the darkness. Greg dug Jodi's side. His eyes were full of panic. I don't want to go in there. I don't want to go in there. Just stay close to me, Jodi said. Jodi rustled his hair. And if it's really scary, just close your eyes and hold on to me tightly. Greg hugged Jodi's side. His eyes were full of panic. I don't want to go. I don't, please. But we got in line behind a family of 4 who seemed to be having similar difficulty with one of their crew. A little girl, probably 8 or 9, who just would not stop crying and tearing at her mother's pant leg, begging to take them home. I watched her with interest. I've always had a bad curiosity for the macabre. Even when I knew things would scare me to tears, I had trouble looking away. I sympathized with the fear Greg and the little girl were feeling. I could feel the skin on my arms trying to shimmy its way up to my neck. Tingling, 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 tingling down. I could feel something in my stomach that made a noise like it wanted out. I was afraid it might just find a way. At the same time, I was shaking with anticipation. Looks like we've got a few minutes before we reach the front of the line, Carl said, standing on tiptoe to see over a few heads. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right. So we got in line and Turkish showed us his tattoo. I remember laughing at it because it turned out I'd named my car the same thing. So to me it looked like he'd tattooed my car's name on his chest. What was it? Roger asked. What was what? My car? It was a gremlin. No, Jodi hissed. Ew. Now what was the name? Oh, Carl scratched his head for a moment, looking up at the night sky. I forget, something. Matilda, Melissa. Anyway, Turkish got ticked off when I laughed at his tattoo and he pulled out a switchblade. I wasn't really afraid he was going to use it, but people around us didn't know that. Before I had a chance to react, the guy selling the tickets, this huge brute, big as a refrigerator, grabbed Turkish by the wrist, twisted hard. Turkish screamed and dropped the knife. I thought, that's it, we're not getting in. But the ticket guy picked up the knife and said, now you can go in. Turkish was turning beet red. Everyone could see he was on the verge of going ape shit, but was holding back. First time in his life, I thought. We went inside, and after we were out of sight of the ticket guy, Turkish started swearing that he was going to go back and kick the ticket guy's ass. There were some fake corpses, and after ranting for 10 minutes, Turkish climbed over the railing and started taking his ganger out on the props. He was just going crazy on stuff, tearing the scenery down, and Jasper and I were like, let's get the fuck out of here, he's gonna get us arrested. We bailed on him, just walked off into the rest of the cave. Of course, that led to some very loud swearing when he realized we were gone. We could hear his tantrum change into an absolute rage 5 minutes later, echoing through the tunnel system. Our group approached the cave entrance, and a tall man cloaked in a Grim Reaper costume was taking money and stamping people's hands. He wore a gray shroud that concealed his face. A rather real-looking scythe was strapped across his back. Your guide will be along shortly, he said in a voice that could curdle milk. We don't get to just go in alone, Carl asked. We had incidents in the past, the Grim Reaper replied, reaching up to stroke his chin. People getting injured, too many lawsuits. Greg continued hugging Jodi tightly around the waist and whimpering. She hunched over him and petted his head, saying his name over and over again, trying to console him. Carl looked at me and rolled his eyes. I guess they don't want people ruining the cave for others. I wonder if he was referring to Turkish, Roger remarked. He rubbed his hands together to keep warm. The Grim Reaper cocked his head with interest, and everybody looked at Carl. Well, when Turkish caught up with us in the tunnel, his hands were all bloody. We asked what had happened. I was scared he'd attack somebody. He told us he'd torn his hands up when he tripped getting back over the railing and falling on the rocks. I wasn't sure whether to believe him or not. The night was ruined, and most were when Turkish got involved. I just wanted to get out of the cave and go home, but we didn't get a chance. Before I could say, let's get out of here, we heard someone very angry shouting. Other people started screaming. There was this thundering sound on the floor, and the floor shook, and what came out of the tunnel was that big, bucking, gargantuan ticket guy. He came barreling at us like a monster, scaring the living piss out of everybody that got in his way. He came right for us. It was like a sixth sense. He knew exactly who he's looking for. Turkish. I knew he didn't stand a chance against that guy. Jasper and I turned and ran. Turkish stood there, trying to look tough, but just as that guy got within arm's reach, he shrieked and fled. Fortunately, the guy was big and slow. We made it out of the cave without him catching up. Once we hit the open air, we ran into the crowds to lose him completely. Let me tell you, being chased by that guy was the scariest thing that I've ever done, even scarier than the cave itself. The look on his face, it was like he wanted to tear us apart. I spent a good 15 minutes just circling around people and cars, trying to keep an eye out for Jasper and Turkish. I ran into Turkish first, unfortunately. He was practically insane with rage. I swear he was frothing at the mouth. Jasper found a couple minutes later, and we hung out by the cars to have a smoke, trying to relax. But Turkish wouldn't let it go. He just kept kicking the car next to him and shouting, "That fucker still has my knife." Jasper and I were like, "Forget it, man. A new knife. That guy will pop your head off if you go back there." But Turkish was, well, stupid. He kept waving his bloody hands around, swearing he was going to come back and beat the shit out of the ticket guy and get his knife back. Then he glared at us and said, "Are you guys with me?" "Fuck no," I told him. "We're not going to fight that gorilla for your stupid knife. Turkish turned fuming red again. I I swear steam was coming out of his ears. He stamped his feet and it flipped us both off, stomped off towards the car. I didn't care. He'd be over the whole thing in a week. I was sure I remembered the last thing I heard him yell before he slammed his car door and drove off. The last thing he said that night ever. If you assholes aren't with me, I'll just bring a friend of my father. That next Monday, when he didn't show up for school, Jasper told me a friend of his father was Turkish's way of saying he was to go home and get his father's Beretta. What's a Beretta? Roger asked. It's a gun. We thought for sure he'd gone home and gotten the gun, then done something stupid, as usual, and now is in jail. But he wasn't. No, he was just gone. You never saw him again? Never. I've only known a few people that know that story. And a riveting story it is, my friend, the Grim Reaper said, crossing his arms. If I see a friend during my journeys, I will tell him you will still speak of him. Carl gave the Reaper a sideways glance and frowned. I couldn't help but smile a little. A gaunt man walked out of the shadows in front of us. His face was long, pale, and his eyes hollow and dark. He wore filthy overalls and a plaid shirt covered with multiple wounds. On his head was a straw hat with a torn brim. Greasy black hair hung down in his face. Welcome, travelers, he groaned, lifting his arms like they were weighted down by pails of sand. If you will please follow me. Keep together, do not stray, and do not cross the railing for your own protection. We followed him as he requested. Roger, then Jodi with Greg hawking her back, me, Carl in the rear. The ground dipped down almost immediately as we entered. The fake torches were replaced by cheap light bulbs that ran along the ceiling and cloaked the ground around us in shadows. The railing paths were made of rotten old wood. It looked slimy, so I kept my hands tucked into my armpits. After descending for a couple minutes, the tunnel turned into darkness. I reached out and put my hand on Greg's shoulder. Do not get lost. But my sudden touch made him scream, and he buried his face in Jodi's back. She glanced back at me and gave me her death stare. Greg, it's okay. Jodi sighed. She reached behind her and patted his head. Sorry, Greg, I said. I wasn't trying to scare you. The tunnel widened into a chamber of smothered rock. Several glass cases had been set up around the perimeter. Fake-looking cadavers were propped up in them, mutilated, dissected, and crushed. Dim spotlights were set up in front of each display to illuminate its contents, casting a nauseating yellow glow about the room. I stepped out from behind Greg and looked into the nearest case. A pair of hands severed at the wrists, 2 legs lost below the knees, blackened feet, a torso, a head crushed beyond repair. I was mesmerized by the gore. It looked so real. I stood there, taking it all in, detail by detail. Something inched up my back, and I twitched with panic before I realized it was my nerves going haywire. These are the bodies of previous explorers, the guide said somberly. Be careful, lest you join them on display. I stared at the corpse, the sound of distant screaming echoing in my ears. Greg sobbing, muffled by Jodi's jacket. The image of that case's contents etched into my mind forever. I closed my eyes and could see every detail as clear as they were still open. After a minute, the guide made a sweeping gesture with his arms, and we were escorted out of the room and back into a narrowing tunnel. The lights were gone. Everything around us was pitch black. Greg sobbed harder, causing Carl to tell him to calm down. I put my hand on his shoulder again and he flinched but didn't scream. I held on to him, suddenly afraid to let go. Something in my head whispered, "If you let go, you'll be lost forever." We inched forward step by step. Somewhere ahead of us, a buzz sounded, followed by a strobe light. Jodi screamed, causing me to look up. The walls around us were sectioned off by large panels of glass. To the right, a man was sitting in a sturdy-looking chair. His arms and legs bound by leather straps. A metal cap sat on his head, and he screamed loudly at me as sparks flew out of the top of it and smoke billowed out around his head. I screamed with him. Roger shouted up in the lead, and I turned away from the electrocution scene to see another cage light up. Inside it, a woman was laying on a table, while a man in a big mask brought a chainsaw down on her abdomen. Blood sprayed over the glass wall, concealing the carnage, but I could see the woman's arms and legs sticking out stiffly on the table. I breathed a sigh of relief, realizing they were fake. The woman must have had her head sticking up through a hole in the table with a prop body tied down on it. It was an impressive special effect. Greg shoved himself into Jodi's back, screaming like I'd never heard him scream before. This was too much, too realistic. Greg had no business being here. None of us did. I pushed Greg forward, causing Jodi to yell at him. I didn't try to tell her it was my fault. I just wanted to get out of that room. We shambling forward as a unit, the guide swaying his head like the horrors around us were just another day in his life. He turned to look back at us and, catching my stare of disgust, smiled and winked at me. I shook my head as if to say no more. He tilted his head to the left as if to say back, "Just take one more look." The glass wall was illuminated from the other side, revealing a teenager in a torn-up baseball jersey and filthy jeans. The look on his face was of absolute terror. It didn't seem fake to me at all. The boy was yelling, but the glass there must have been soundproof, because the only sound we could hear was the man screaming while being electrocuted behind us. I tried to read his mouth movements, but the only words I could figure out was help. As we watched, a large, muscle-bound man in nothing but a pair of black leather pants appeared from a dark corner with a very large axe. The blade on the axe was grimy and dull-looking. The teenager went wild inside the glass case. He thrashed against his restraints. The lights went out for a moment, causing Greg to give a short scream and then came back on. The man with the axe turned to look at us and heard Carl whisper, "Oh my God." The axe man heft his weapon over his shoulder, turned back to the panicked teenager. At the same time, Carl shouted, "Let's go, everybody out." I tried looking over at him, but I was hypnotized by the scene unfolding on the other side of the glass. The kid in the shredded clothing was crying. I could see that he had pissed his pants. There was no prop body. How were they going to pull off this effect? I couldn't figure it out. The axeman tensed his arms and leaned back before pivoting as he swung the axe. That's when the lights went out. Greg's screaming was making my ears ring. I heard Carl shove past Roger and the guide, Jodi shouting his name over and over again. I could feel Greg behind her jerk out of my grip. I stumbled to keep up as we fought our way through the tunnel. Left, right, right again. I almost ran into a wall a couple of times trying to keep up. We turned a corner in the tunnel. Lighting returned. Carl was storming for the exit, not saying a word. Roger was running to catch up. Jodi was dragging Greg, who was stumbling with his head buried into her back. I looked around and realized that the guide had somehow gotten behind me. I looked over my shoulder, and there he was, staring back at me, his expression blank. The path went over a small underground lake. As we crossed it, a huge form rose up out of the water. It was a man in a hockey mask, though at the same time the reference was lost on me. Slowly, methodically, he strode through the water towards us as we crossed the bridge. "Go," I whispered to Greg, but we had caught up with the group ahead of us and we were stuck. "Go," I said louder, pushing Greg. "Go, go, go." The man in the hockey mask began climbing over the railing and I lost it. I started screaming. The guide started laughing. Greg had not stopped screaming through any of this, but it was clear his throat was getting raw. Jodi screamed at Carl, and Carl started shoving through the group ahead of us, who started shouting because they didn't know what was going on. We were running when we came out of the cave. Greg collapsed on the ground crying, and Jodi picked him up to cradle him in her arms. Carl was white as a ghost, and his eyes seemed wild and panicked. Only Roger appeared to be unfazed by everything that had happened. I hated him for his calm. "Let's get out of here," Carl said, and that was it. We didn't even get to stop to catch our breath. Jodi gathered up Greg. I went over and held Roger's hand, and we walked away from the hellish place. "I'll see you later, Greg," someone shouted from behind us. I turned to look, and the guide was standing there waving goodbye to us. Nice touch, I thought. We all rode back in silence except for the sound of Greg crying uncontrollably in the back seat. "Jesus, get it together, guy." I got to sit up front because Jodi elected to sit in the back and try to comfort him. She wrapped her arms around him and hugged him tightly as his body shook with racking sobs. Roger sat quietly looking out at the window. I watched Carl with curiosity, but he stared blankly out at the road. This time we didn't speed, though there was a clear sense of urgency, like we had to get away as quickly as possible. "Carl," I whispered to keep Greg from hearing, "what happened back there?" "It was him," Carl said, not trying to lower his voice. "That man with the axe. That was the Grillo chased us out of the cave 10 years ago." Greg was still crying when we pulled up in the front of our house. Our parents had not returned yet, so Jodi and Carl read stories to him to try to help him sleep. It took them half an hour to calm him down, and I think in the end they may have given him something like NyQuil to assist. I lay in bed, looking out the window, listening to his sobbing in the next room until it died down. I shivered, laying there thinking about everything I remember from that night. All of the horrible imagery burned into my skull. I relived it over and over in my head, as I am prone to do when something dramatic occurs. Eventually, Jodi came in and sat on the edge of my bed. "Jodi," I looked at her for a moment to make sure I had her attention. She had dark circles under her eyes. "Promise me we won't ever go back there." She sighed. "Oh yeah, I can definitely promise we'll never take you guys back there." "No," I said, looking at her straight in the eyes. "Promise me you'll never go back either." "No, hell no," Jodi frowned. I turned and stared out the window at the black October night. "Madeline," I whispered. Jodi looked out the window with me, her brow furrowed at the moment. "What are you talking about? Who's Madeline?" "Carl's first car." She stood up and looked down at me. "How did you know that?" I pulled the covers up to my chin. I could feel a shiver developing in my arms and legs, an uncontrollable trembling that seemed to want to shake my internal organs loose. I could feel my fingernails digging into my palms, even though the thickness heaviness of my comforter. I saw it tattooed on the chest of the dismembered body in the first room up the cave. Oh shit. I kinda had a feeling that was what he saw, but that was good. That was really, really good. Well, that is it for tonight, everybody. I hope you enjoyed these Halloween spooky are no sleep stories. I think I'm gonna do the true stories and creepy encounters next for spooky season. I know I haven't been doing them lately, but I think it's time to shake it up a little bit. Shake it up for spooky season. Shake it up. So this weekend we went to the only haunted house that was open, right? This weekend we're going to the Blood Prison, but I went with a friend of mine to the Blood View House, or something like that. But it was like basic, old school, but terrifying. And I'm not easily scared. The Blood Prison is just so cool because it is really well done. But to me, that's not as scary. This was like you're in the dark. You can't see a thing in front of you. There's people jumping out at you. You're walking through a forest. It's nuts. I was like, hold on to me. Don't move. Don't let go. And I'm not a scaredy cat at all. But going through those dark, they're like mazes in there. And it was really good. At first I was thinking, I don't know if I want to go to a scary, lower end place. But honestly, that's the scariest. It felt real, like you're walking in the woods and all of a sudden you're at a dead end. What the hell? How did you miss it? And then you go into the second haunted house and it's all dark. I mean, literally I was caught in this corner and I could not see to get out. Finally, these people are like, I think you have to back up. But nobody was there to help you. I mean, it was crazy. And if you're in Ohio and you're going to one of these places, sorry, I'm yawning, one of these haunted houses that is not real well organized as far as times and stuff go, I would definitely recommend getting the fast pass. It saved us about a 2-hour wait in line and it was like $10 more. I got it on Groupon, and that was the scariest one I'd ever been to. Seriously. Yeah, that was the scariest one I'd ever been to. I think he felt the same way. It was really funny. Because we were joking about how he's like, I'm a scaredy cat. And I'm like, no, you're fine. This'll be kind of silly, I think. But it wasn't silly at all. Oh my god, I wish I could have taken that back. Because it was so almost like you were walking there by yourself. And they had it spaced out so you were not with anybody else. You were not with other patrons. You were alone in the forest. And you had no idea where these people were. It was so dark. But it was really cool. Bloodview, I think it's called. It's in Octopath. If you're from Ohio, Octopath in down by Akron, a little bit. But it's Octopath. was saving them to do role plays. But I don't know what I've got such a cool witch outfit, I've got a malevolent outfit, I've got a, like, dark princess outfit, I've got a princess outfit, I have a fairy outfit, I have like, a native outfit, which I might actually wear. And then of course I've got like sorceress outfit. So tell me what kind of, if you want to see any role plays or me just dress up and then read scary stories or true scary stories. Yeah, I know they're scarier, but this is spooky season, everybody. Please don't forget to subscribe. I'm really trying to make my goal of 5,000 this year, and yeah, so I'm working on it. I'm trying to do different things, and I don't know if I should just make a different channel and do all ASMR, but I'm going to start doing scrapbooking, no talking, just scrapbooking. I have all this stuff to do it. That one I may make just a separate channel. That way there's no spooky stories in there. I don't think people who watch scrapbooking, I love watching scrapbooking, so I can't even say this, but I don't think the majority, let me change it to that, of people who watch scrapbooking also watch the scary stories. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe I'm just being completely not fair. But it is 2 o'clock in the morning when my dogs are actually quiet. I'm just had to like bite the bullet and work at night because these dogs during the day, wow, oh my goodness, it's crazy. And then you got the garbage people and the Amazon guy, the electrician, and the bomb. I mean, there's always somebody somewhere around my house that the dogs are barking at, and you never know when they're gonna go off. And when they go off, it's loud. It's loud. No matter how much soundproofing I have, it doesn't matter. Alright, everybody, I love you guys. Have a wonderful, 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 wonderful evening. Relax. Christmas